So this story is actually important. This is along the same vein of what we're just talking about here. But there is this meeting that's ongoing, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, where all of the generals for the U.S. military are meeting or are going to be meeting with Pete Hegseth. And nobody can figure out what it's about. Although, again, we had this tweet today by Donald Trump, who said that at the request of Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, I'm directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. I'm also authorizing full force, meaning click, click, pull, if necessary. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So meaning you F around, you might find out 6 feet under. Which again, about damn time. I don't know why you allow people to attack federal agents. If you walked up to a police officer and attacked them, you're going to get shot. But for some reason, we've allowed our ICE facilities to just be attacked. Now, I actually think that this has been a methodical approach by the Trump administration, understanding what needs to be done, but knowing that they need political will to get it done. So they've had to allow violence to a certain extent so they could say, look, go to the people and say, look, if we don't do this, we're all going to be in a world of hurt and people are going to die. But if they had preemptively gone the other way, then the left, because the left was hoping for the ICE agents to kill people, to shoot people, then they would have used that as a way to destroy Trump. So at this point, thanks to the unfortunate murders that have been happening over the last couple of weeks here, I think the American people as a whole are sick and tired of it. And I think this is why you're now seeing this move. So let's use, this is from The Hill. It's a left-wing news rag. This is by Ellen Mitchell. Ellen Mitchell. Don't know who that is. Okay. Hegseth stirs speculation with mystery meeting of military leaders. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's last-minute call for hundreds of generals and admirals, and their staff, by the way, to travel to a Virginia base has current and former defense officials scratching their heads as to what would warrant such a major in-person gathering. I think you're going to see potentially troops and or National Guard being sent to cities anywhere where you see mass rioting against ICE, which it's a risky move, but I think it's necessary at this point. The order to attend a Tuesday meeting at a Marine Corps University in Quantico, reportedly to hear Hegseth give a short speech on military standards and warrior ethos, was sent this past week to all officers with the rank of 1-star general or rear admiral and above, as well as their senior enlisted leaders. The highly unusual gathering, not seen before in recent memory in terms of its size and last-minute nature, has created more questions than answers as to what would warrant what some former military officials have labeled an extremely bizarre confab. Retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling said, "We're way out in terms of unusual in this tone." And active duty colleagues have said, don't know what this is about. So it could be a shifting national security strategy. It could be cuts to the General Officer Corps. Secretary Hegseth has mentioned that several times. It could be about the upcoming budget stalemate, or it could be concerns over information leaks or press leaks. But as I was just saying, I think it might be more internally focused. Again, I don't know anyone in the Trump administration. So I'm just guessing, but this seems more logical to me. Now, the Pentagon confirmed Thursday that Hegseth will be addressing his senior military leaders early next week, but has offered no additional details as to what the conversation might entail. The directive was reportedly sent to virtually all the military's top commanders worldwide, including all senior officers with the rank of brigadier general or above. Now, the Washington Post reported Friday that its meeting is meant to be an eyeball-to-eyeball kind of conversation between Hegseth and his top officers, citing one person familiar with ongoing discussions. But such a large in-person convergence of top military brass has never taken place in the history of the U.S. military, according to Hertling, who said, "Certainly during wartime, generals commanding in a theater are brought in individually with a team, or the president or the Secretary of Defense visits them at their theater operation, but I've never seen anything like this before, and it just seems extremely bizarre and strange." Well, let's argue that we've never been in this situation before as a country, maybe outside of pre-Civil War. We're in a very strange place here in America. So, doing strange things out of the ordinary seems par for the course for me for the Trump administration. They have to. They need to be unpredictable. Anyway, the Hill goes on to write, it is very rare to call for such a large meeting of top officers, which blah, blah, blah. They've already said that multiple times. Blah, 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 blah. Let's see. No, Hegseth's directive and its lack of public explanation have even alarmed some outside groups, including Democracy Forward Foundation, a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. that works to expose government corruption. Of course they are. On Friday, the group filed a Freedom of Information Act. They're not going to get an answer on this right now, seeking records on the purpose of the meeting and any secretary assessments of the risks of so many top military leaders leaving their stations to gather in one place. Yeah, they're not going to get that request approved. In recent weeks, President Trump has developed, they said, a pattern of using respected members of the military as a decoration for his antics. I wonder which side of the aisle these guys are on. And has improperly deployed the military in our nation's cities. Did he, though? He has done this without the authorization of Congress and against the wishes of governors and city leaders, Democracy Forward President and CEO Skye Perryman said in a statement referring to the Trump administration's use of service members to aid federal agents in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. during the attacks by the radical left. I added that part. Now, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, also voiced its concerns about the meeting to members of Congress, urging lawmakers to assert their authority and influence as a member of Congress to demand transparency, accountability, and compliance with the law. I mean, ACLU is just a left-wing rag that's going to try to stop the Trump administration no matter what they do. Now, at minimum, the ACLU's director, Chris Anders, says the Pentagon must disclose the agenda for the meeting. No, they don't. Not right now, they don't. And any planned changes in policy or program. But more importantly, we urge you to obtain assurances that any changes announced or instituted at the meeting will not result in further unconstitutional, illegal, or other harmful actions. I mean, this guy can just go pound sand. Nobody cares what he thinks. But, the Hill is a left-wing rag, so of course they're going to report on it. Now, Trump and Vice President Vance have both sought to downplay the strange nature of the meeting. Yeah, they're not going to reveal their hand. And they're certainly not going to tell this corrupt news media what they're doing, especially if this is about quelling the terrorism that's festering within our own borders. Why in the hell would they announce it? And Trump said, why is this such a big deal? That's Donald Trump for you. You act like this is a bad thing. Isn't it nice that people are coming from all over the world to meet? Oh my God, that's great. And Vance called the meeting not unusual at all, telling reporters, I think it's odd that you guys have made it into such a big story. Yeah, because there's nothing to tell. There's just a lot of speculation. And I think the left is actually afraid of what this could mean. And I think that's why you're seeing this all over the place. They're hoping to get pressure for the administration to back off of whatever the hell they're planning. Now, Richard Haass, AAS there, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, hypothesized that the meeting could be a cultural thing, with Hegseth wanting to assert his authority. It's just a stunt, and it looks truly, truly excessive. And again, I'm going to disagree with all of these people. I think this is going to end up being Antifa related. He said this on Morning Joe. There's easier ways to do this. We have fought wars in recent years, by the way, without people leaving their bases. Yeah, but not very well, did they? That's why we have these secure video systems. You don't need to do something like this. It has to be something much more personal. It could also be a fishing expedition, by the way, to see who would leak this. You never know. So, and why all of this matters is let's shift over to the post-millennial, because this is also happening simultaneously. And again, I think these are related. Attorney Pam Bondi is now activating Joint Terrorism Task Forces across the country as far-left attacks on ICE rage on. I think the reason why you bring in the generals is because there may come a day when they will need to do something like a national emergency, depending on what happens. If terrorism accelerates, if more murders accelerate, if there are actual attacks, real attacks where a lot of people get killed. I think this is setting the stage to crush the left-wing radicals in this country, which, I'll be honest, I think about damn time. It's risky to do because it's on American soil. But I don't think the left is giving anyone on the right or even people that are neutral any choice here. They are hell-bent at destroying the country. Antifa has one purpose, and that is to bring chaos and confusion until the country it devolves into nothingness and has to be reborn in their own image. So let's see what the post-millennial has to say about the U.S. Attorney Pam Bondi here. This was by No one. Okay. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has instructed the Joint Terrorism Task Forces throughout the nation to take immediate action to identify, disrupt, and investigate domestic terrorist activity, including repeated violence and obstruction targeting federal personnel. Earlier today, Human Events Jack Posobiec or whatever called for the move to be made. I guess this is it. Let's see what's...
In fact, I know from having done previous investigations and work into this that, it always seems that there's some guy in the back of you talk about the silos, some investigator in the back of one of those Joint Terrorism Task Forces, the JTTFs that are across all the major cities, who has done in many cases a lot of the tracking of the information of these individuals in these networks, and yet it's siloed and they can't share it with people because they don't stay in one AOR, they don't stay in one city, they do other things, and they don't share it with other agencies who could then bring those investigative prowess and and potentially prosecution forward. So I absolutely applaud the fact that you've done that. I hope the JTTFs can be a resource here as well. Obviously, DHS plays a huge role there.
Right. And again, I'm still going to go out on my limb. I still think these two stories, the Mystery General meeting and this move by Attorney Pam Bondi, likely have some kind of connection. I might be reaching here. I might be wrong. But I've got this little itch in the back of my head that says, he's already talked about bringing troops in. Why not have a meeting to discuss where things are going? I don't know. Again, I'm not in the military. I don't know any of these generals. I don't know Donald Trump. But that's what I think. Now, on Friday night, Pam Bondi wrote, I have witnessed the continued onslaught of violence perpetrated against ICE officers across our country. The Department of Justice will not stand idly by in the face of such lawlessness. At my direction, I am deploying DOJ agents to ICE facilities and wherever ICE comes under siege to safeguard federal agents, protect federal property, and immediately arrest all individuals engaged in any federal crime. Pursuant to President Trump's recent executive action, I'm also instructing the Joint Terrorism Task Forces across the country to disrupt and investigate all entities and individuals engaged in acts of domestic terrorism, including the repeated acts of violence and obstruction against federal agents. The Department of Justice will seek the most serious available charges against all participants in these criminal mobs, including conspiracy offenses, assault offenses, civil disorder offenses, and terrorism offenses. While these never-ending attacks are designed to break our will, they will only strengthen our resolve to complete the work begun. And to that end, I have directed the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, and the US and the United States Marine, or the USMS, to accelerate our efforts alongside the Department of Homeland Security to locate, apprehend, detain, prosecute, and remove all illegal aliens present in our country. The rule of law will prevail. And by the way, again, I also think too, because if you're going at some point to bring in the military, I think back to Operation I'm just going to say it. This was back under the Dwight D. Eisenhower administration, and they deported millions of illegal aliens in just a matter of months. So this has happened before, and you could bringing in the military would allow for a multi-purpose affair here, which it might end up not just being about quelling the terrorist people, but also helping to implement mass deportation. So I don't know. Let's see. And then Stephen Miller said, we are witnessing domestic terrorist sedition against the federal government. The JTTF has been dispatched by the Attorney General pursuant to NSPM 7. All necessary resources will be utilized. And on Friday, anti-ICE rioters sought to obstruct a federal vehicle's entry into the ICE facility located in Broadview near Chicago. And officers responded with pepper balls and tear gas to clear the area. Arrests were made, and at least one firearm was confiscated. And I guess this was the weirdos, I guess. Let's check them out.
Shoot ICE! Shoot the fucker! Shoot the fucker!
See, that should be incitement, no? Well, these guys really look ragtag. Okay. Now, on Wednesday, 29-year-old Joshua Jan, we remember this killer, opened fire on an ICE facility in Dallas, killing one detainee and injuring others. The motive was anti-ICE, as left-wing political violence continues to rage throughout America in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So, yeah, so I think, and again, I may be reaching here, and you guys can tell me what you think, but I don't know. I think all of these are going to end up being related when all is said and done. So we'll just have to see what happens next. But I am cautiously optimistic that the Trump administration is finally getting their act together and going after these people. And they need to, because this country will not last with this kind of a violence going